Good morning and or good afternoon, depending where you are located. I'm Merrill Friedman. I lead Anthem's Inclusive Policy and Advocacy, and I am thrilled to welcome you to today's session. It's session number 5 in our series called Entrepreneurs, Startups, and Integrating Disability Inclusion into Tomorrow's Companies. I want to thank Goal 17 partners, the Harkin Institute, and Global Goals, easy for me to say, Advisory for their support of this series and all of the panelists and brilliant folks that they have pulled together to share information with all of us. Before we kick off formally today, I just want to give a brief description of myself. I am wearing a black shirt. I have salt and pepper hair. It's really more salty than pepper at this point at all, but I try it. It is curly. I am sitting in my home office, hopefully for not many months longer, with a few pictures in my newly put together small treadmill with a rising desk on it to see if I can't get a few steps in during my day these days. Welcome to my home office and welcome to the webinar. And we will also throughout this journey together today, make sure that we are announcing ourselves as we begin speaking and also closing out our comments so everybody can track with us. If you have any issues with accessibility, please just put it in the chat and also put any comments and contributions in the chat. We will be tracking those throughout the entire session and really would appreciate you staying engaged with us and helping us to build out a broader conversation today. Each of these panel discussions, as I mentioned, this is number 5, which have been hosted throughout the year, is focused on identifying the solutions to permanently change the system to be more accessible so people with disabilities are fully integrated in companies at all levels with equal pay, equal recognition, equal responsibility. This is about equity. This conversation needs to keep going. The genesis for the conversations is a white paper that was sponsored by the Harkin Institute and Goal 17 partners that was titled Solving, Then What? Empowering Investors to Achieve Competitive Integrated Employment for People with Disabilities. The first recommendation of the paper is to bring together the private sector investors in the disability community to identify ways in which investors can leverage the $40 trillion worldwide that is managed under social and environmentally responsible investment frameworks to drive greater inclusion of people with disabilities, again, into all levels of the private sector. Entry-level positions to the board of directors. So I always say we need to be infiltrating companies. We need to be in companies. We create change by being included in part of the decision-making and execution. So today's conversation is focused on the final recommendation in the paper in Solving Then What that catalyzes the business environment and investment capital to foster the inception of market growth in companies built from the ground up with disability inclusion as the core operating principle. As we've discussed in previous panel discussions, if you've been able to join or catch the recording, investing in people with disabilities and companies created by people with disabilities is not charity or philanthropy. It's good business. It's better business. Rather, right, this is all about creating those companies that are able to tap into the global market of consumers, innovative products that can change the world for the better and use their products to spur even more innovation created by and for people with disabilities and everybody else. So considering innovations like audiobooks, cruise control in vehicles, keyboards on your computer, Alexa, segways, voice activated dictation features on your iPhone, for those of you who are more technologically savvy than me, are all part of the discussion, right? The underlying technology of each of these was brought to the market to assist people with disabilities. Their broader applicability was quickly appreciated, and the products were adapted into universally designed products for mass use. All meet human needs while solving access barriers across society. So that's the prelude. I want to introduce you to my new friends, which I am excited to be with them today and hear from them. I think you guys will enjoy this discussion greatly. So I'm going to start with Daniel Abadie, and when I get that wrong, Daniel's going to correct me. But Daniel's the founder of Vivid Vocals VO, a voiceover production company that believes there is a voice for every story. He is a voiceover artist with a passion for bringing commercials, audiobooks, and narrations to life using his vocal skills. He's also part of Synergies Works I2I Accelerator Program and is a Synergies Works 2021 Impact Grant recipient. And we will hear more about Synergies Works today. Daniel's passion for voiceover started when he was young. He'd entertain his family and friends with play-by-play actions of his favorite sporting events. Daniel was diagnosed at an early age with autism and therefore started speech therapy. Over the years, he's been blessed with many therapists of different modalities who helped him with his disability. So Daniel, we are excited to hear from you shortly. Regina Kline. Gina is the founder or CEO. Some of you may have heard of her. She's the founder and CEO of SmartJob LLC, a public benefit limited liability corporation dedicated to closing the disability wealth gap and making jobs smarter by expanding impact investments in disability-led solutions in small businesses. Gina is nationally known for her litigation and policy work in advancing the rights of people with disabilities to move from sub-minimum wage and segregated employment to competitive integrated employment. In the Obama administration, Gina served as senior counsel in the Office of the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights at the United States Department of Justice, where she provided legal and policy counsel regarding efforts to implement the Americans with Disabilities Act. Thank you for your service. Aarti Sahgal, and I know I probably did that wrong again too, so Aarti, please feel free also to correct me. Aarti Sahgal started Synergies Work with a simple goal, helping individuals with disabilities earn a livelihood. As the mother of a young adult with Down syndrome, Aarti believes in raising the bar for individuals with disabilities by challenging the soft bigotry of low expectations. This is why this panel is going to be so great today. Synergies Works is an independent nonprofit organization committed to economically empowering the economic empowerment of people with disabilities by helping them build sustainable businesses, providing a range of services to entrepreneurs, including mentorship, classes about creating and running a business, and building online marketplaces. Furthermore, entrepreneurs such as Daniel, who we've already introduced, you'll have the pleasure to hear from, having the opportunity to be part of his I2I incubator program, receive startup capital for their business. So it'd be great to hear from the two of them together today on how this works. So welcome, panelists. We are super excited to have you with us, and thank you for your time in preparing and for being here today. So let's transition, move right into the discussion, why we're here together today, and start talking about that connection, the connection between access to resources, whether it be mentoring, investment capital, that leads to the ability to launch and grow a business. So Daniel, if it's okay with you, I am going to get started with you and ask you to respond a little bit to what are those resources, right, that entrepreneurs like yourself need to not only start the business, but also turn it into one that will be successful over the long term and meets your goals that you set out to achieve. This is Merrill. I'm done speaking.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Abadie. And first of all, before I get started, I just want to say thank you for inviting me to this discussion. I'm honored. Now, as for the resources of what goes into making a business, there are 5 crucial ones. They are education, support, mentoring, marketing, and finances. Education, which is the first one, is important because of the technical industry know-how from others who have expertise and experience in the business world. This helps me make smarter business decisions. Synergies Works has given me the tools needed to create my business plan and tackle the legal formalities in starting a business. The second one is support. A good support team gives their client inspiration and guidance needed to keep up with their goals in life. Mentoring. Now, for me, besides my family, I've been blessed to have 2 great mentors through Synergies Work. They are Miss Aarti Sahgal, who I'm pretty sure you see through the picture right there, and Miss Suzanne Holman, who I was matched with through Synergies Work due to the Match Through Mentor program. Now, mentors can continue to offer guidance on such things as personal and commercial branding, business and personal strategies, and public relations. Marketing resources is next, and this helps by navigating you through both the emailing, social networking, and advertising districts in it. Right now, this is where I am currently. Since launching my business in May, I've been building a network of contacts in the voiceover industry through mostly LinkedIn, and it has been mostly voiceover artists and a couple of others. I've connected with such voiceover artists from around the world, from some places like Seattle to all the places to like Tokyo, Japan. My next step will be to use email marketing to offer my services to companies. Finally, the last resource, which is financial resources, which, as we all know, are crucial to the business developments. So far, I have used my own capital to create my in-home professional studio, which you can see behind me with these black panel foam boards. I will need to look into borrowed and venture capital in the future to expand and grow. My long-term goals include developing an app where I create and narrate social stories for teens and young adults with disabilities to teach them social skills that they will need to navigate through the real world. My current first social story that I'm working on involves on how to handle criticism from work. And that is, I believe, all the necessary resources I have gone over. So I pass the baton over back to Merrill. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. This is Merrill speaking again. Yes, I think we all need to continually grow and evolve as we hear feedback from work. I think that's a great one. I think we'll note that to possibly come back to as well. So building off of that, Aarti, can you explain to us a little bit more and share with folks how Synergies works and how your team recruits, mentors, and launches startups, which is such an incredible business model. Clearly, you and Daniel speaking to that is going to be, great for folks to hear how you all connected, right, and how this goes. So I will hand it to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aarti Sahgal. Thank you, Merrill, for inviting me today. Just to introduce myself, I'm an Indian Asian woman with black unruly hair, wearing a maroon shirt. And behind me is this beautiful painting of a blue crab on an orange background. And I'm going to shamelessly plug in. This is a painting done by a young artist in Virginia who also happens to have Down syndrome. And if you want to buy any such paintings, you need to visit our platform, Synergies work platform. As you mentioned, Merrill, Synergies work is a business accelerator which supports people with disabilities build and grow their businesses. And we do this by providing end-to-end business solutions, supporting founders at every stage of their startup, and closing that gap that you mentioned earlier between the disability world and the business world. And, there are, I think, around 1,500 plus incubators and accelerators in the country today, and none of them are targeting people with disabilities. This work started, actually, it's rooted in my own life experiences as a mom. I have 2 boys, and my oldest son quit his job with the bank to decided, had the startup fever. He wanted to set up his own company. And he had that choice to make, and he had those opportunities to make that choice. And I realized that these choices are not available to Angad, my younger one, and other people with disabilities. And that's the reason why we started Synergies work, that how can we bridge that gap that exists, and how do we provide real choices to people to start their own businesses. So we do 3 things. As Daniel, you heard from Daniel, we have an I2I, that is Idea to Incubation Business Program, which is a virtual interactive session led by business leaders. We continue to support the fund founders for 2 years after that, provide one-on-one support to the founders, connect them to mentors. We provide funding for them, and we provide them with access on how to get customers. So just think of us like a safety net. I use an example of, everybody has been to a circus, right? And you have seen these trapeze artists who are high up in the air, jumping from one pole to the other. And we always think that they are doing it alone. But we do not know is that there are a whole bunch of people in the wings ready to jump in case there's an emergency. And there is a safety net at the bottom to catch them. So for our entrepreneurs, we think of ourselves as that safety net. We are there for them so as they build and grow and sustain their businesses. That is in a nutshell what we do. And this is Aarti signing off.
Thank you, Aarti. This is Merrill again. It is really helpful. You know, I was reflecting as you were speaking on, you know, Daniel's approach, right, and those steps and how that mentorship, I would imagine, you know, aligns with that to connect the dots. So hopefully we'll be able to speak a little more to some of those, you know, finer points and share them with the group. But let's jump a little broader here, you know, and Gina, if you can talk some, right, about SmartJobs, right, raising large amounts of financial capital to invest in startups created by people with disabilities, and talking a bit about, right, that value proposition.
Sure. And thank you, Merrill, for having me on this panel with such fabulous co-panelists. This is really exciting for me to be here with Aarti and Daniel, because they're a use case for really dynamic programs that are happening in the United States that are really successful in supporting entrepreneurs. I'm doing my usual, I'm talking before describing myself. I'm a woman in a room with lots of books behind me and a lot of blonde brown hair and a black shirt. SmartJob is designed as a platform to create accessible investment capital for entrepreneurs with disabilities. The investment capital is inherently risk capital. We are looking for people with great ideas, transformative ideas that are going to build a universally designed, inclusive future of work. And by that, I mean, our investment thesis has 4 parts. We're really looking at upskilling and reskilling work. I like to call this future-proofing work. We're looking at supporting accelerators, entrepreneurship programs, and curricula around the world, not unlike what Aarti is describing, the field building, the basic programmatic building blocks of how you support other entrepreneurs who are at various stages in the ideation and bringing a product to minimum viable product, bring a product to market. We're also very interested in the next generation of work-related technology. By that, we don't mean assistive technology that is hyper-focused on what you cannot do, on functional deficit. We're way beyond the medical model. We are talking about what you want to do, what you can do, what your strengths are from a human capital perspective rather than a deficit model. And in the final category of our investment thesis, we're looking to support underrepresented founders with disabilities. Now, the worldwide investing network has been super focused on gender lens investing, racial justice investing. These years of the pandemic, it's a sad reality that it's now plural, 2020 and 2021, has been a revelation about the systemic inequality that has been sort of entrenched and deepened by a lack of access to capital for entrepreneurs. What we are trying to do is diligence, evaluate, find great deal flow from around the world from entrepreneurs with disabilities, not unlike Daniel, who have tremendous ideas, who are in search of venture capital, and who are being overlooked by generalist investors or traditional investors. Now, our goal is to de-risk those investments for follow-along investors, to use market intelligence to say, there's true value here. Now, let me back up as to why we're doing all of that 4-part investment thesis in the first place. And I come to this having been a lawyer, a plaintiff side lawyer, a trial attorney at the Department of Justice enforcing the ADA. And my colleagues and I know, and many of the people in the audience today know, and all of the panelists know, that we are in the middle of a disability unemployment crisis. The thing that's peculiar about it is it's lasted for more than 30 years. It's lasted for more than 100 years. We do not have labor market participation that corresponds with the amount of our public spend, with our overall public spend on workforce development. And in fact, we've got half of those living in long-term poverty in the United States as identifying as people with disabilities. We have 60% of people with disabilities who are financially vulnerable or technically poor. And we have a multi-trillion-dollar hole in the economy because nearly 2/3 of working age people with disabilities are not working, in fact. So our investment proposition is about catching up and leading. Work is being disrupted in a way that is quite favorable to people with disabilities, and here's why. The disruptions in work are bringing in a new golden age of remote and flexible work. People with disabilities have been demanding remote work since the beginning. And the technologies, the early stage companies, and the disability entrepreneurs that we're meeting every single day and evaluating for investment are using the inherent design functionality and experience of the lived experiences with disabilities to ideate the next generation of workplace technology. Work is becoming more remote, adaptable, sustainable, and accessible for everyone. I'm calling this the accommodation economy. What we need to do is get investment capital in the hands of the entrepreneurs that are creating these new technologies for remote and distributed work, for virtual reality training, for advanced certification and skills training, upskilling workers. We need to get people investment capital in order to bring these ideas to market. And Merrill, the thing that is really exciting is that these technologies will not only revolutionize work for people with disabilities, but they will pave the way for new ways of working for everyone. I have said too much, but this is the beginning of a new era of thinking of investment from a strengths-based perspective in people with disabilities and those who are ideating bringing new ideas to market with the lived experience of disability seen as long-term value creation in the economy.
Gina, this is Merrill speaking again. Thank you, and thank you for those comments. And I think, well, you bring up many good points, and we can revisit them. And Aarti and Daniel may have some questions, for you as well from that. But also just this philosophy, right, in this movement to say that, for years, people with disabilities have saying remote work could be very helpful, right, and create a lot of access. And everybody now, not everybody, many people, are driving this conversation around remote work and accessibility going forward, even as we hope the pandemic transitions, right, and people start to come back. So a little bit of a follow-up question there is, is that being discussed, at the investor level? Is it being discussed, this different type of hybrid workplace and remote work for many people, including, of course, people with disabilities who have been talking about it for a long time. Is that being discussed at the investor level?
It is. And I think, that is actually, that is a hopping business. That is a catalyzed, market sector. There is action there. What is not there, what is not sort of prolific, is this concept of bringing disability into conversations about future work. And, there's a tremendous worldwide conversation going on right now about building an inclusive economy. There's a tremendous worldwide conversation about equity, diversity, and inclusion. But when it comes down to it, there is no group of people more conspicuously unemployed than people with disabilities. And there's no group that could benefit more from investment in new technology than people with disabilities as it relates to work. What better investment proposition than to invest in the very people closest to the problem to create newly designed solutions? And as your intro pointed out, people with disabilities have long been creating new ideas, new technologies. They just haven't owned the equity in those ideas. So the market disruption here, the fundamental shift is, investing in the person who developed the idea. It's a bottom-up strategy rather than quite simply a top-down strategy. It's not just a conversation about onboarding people into the largest companies in the Fortune 500, although that is important and necessary. But this is about those who are opting out of traditional means of employment. How can they access the risk capital to grow their own ideas and their own businesses? And the little trick about this in the long-term value creation is the larger businesses in the economy need the solutions that these entrepreneurs with the bottom-up strategy are generating, whether it be to make their workers more agile, whether these are technologies that will improve the lives of people who are working in those companies, or whether it's a long-term acquisition strategy for those entrepreneurs that would later be, would be a real wealth generator and an impact multiplier. So what we're dealing with is we need the top-down strategy, and we need it to meet in the middle with this bottom-up strategy with entrepreneurs around the world developing ideas. Competition is great. Building a market is great. And so we don't need to tell anyone about the value of future of work investing. We need to bring disability to those conversations and to the table.
100% agree that these solutions need to be made with people with disabilities, creating the solutions, being part of the decision making, that execution. Totally agree. So let's move to that.
One point.
Please, Aarti.
Yeah, just a point to what everything that Gina has said to it. I like to add that yes, there is a need. COVID and technology and inclusion is happening. But I think we also need to be cognizant about the fact that there does exist a digital divide in this country. And this has been heightened and exacerbated and brought to the upfront in the last 1 year when we all started working virtually. My work makes me deal with people with disabilities who are on the margin, who are actually living on the margins. And we realized through our work last year that many of them do not have accessible internet. They do not have even a smartphone, okay, to access markets, because everything now the markets we are talking about e-commerce, the way to do it. So let's be cognizant about the fact that yes, it is making the world change, but we have to realize that we carry the people who are at the bottom along with us in this change that is going to take place. And I totally agree with Gina about the fact that we are talking about not having people with disabilities in this conversation when that change and the inclusivity is being talked about at the corporation level. The only point that I would like to say is 92% of all businesses in the United States are micro businesses. That is the backbone of this economy, right? And by any statistical numbers and any estimation that you take, there are millions of these micro businesses that are probably being led by people with disabilities. So how do we ensure that the passion and the talent of this population is also brought into the conversation that Gina is leading at that level? So that's the only critical point that I would like to make is, yes, there are a few Googles and there are a few Facebooks, but 92% of those businesses in the company are those which are not the Googles and the Teslas of the world.
Which is probably a good thing.
I agree on that one.
This is Merrill again. So, you pose the question, like, how do we ensure, right, that, does anybody want to, take a stab at that before, we move on? Gina, do you want to?
This is fun for me. So I'll respond to Aarti, but by agreeing with her. And one of the propositions that we've really taken on at SmartJob is how do we figure out how do we gain enough flexibility to do fundamental field building with really rich entrepreneurship training programs. I hate to use the word training. I don't mean training in the classic sense of training to nowhere, a bridge to nowhere. I mean on-the-job training, certification, something that actually has measurable currency in the market. So one of the things is your traditional venture capitalist does not deploy grant capital. They don't support programs that support other entrepreneurs. We are looking to facilitate building the field at the same time that we're evaluating other companies, the early stage, and trying to facilitate the deployment of venture capital in companies. We're also trying to facilitate with very great intention to build the field, philanthropic capital, the aim of which is to support as an impact multiplier programs that support hundreds of entrepreneurs. And in doing that, you're saying that there's no business idea that's too small or that is unworthy of the support and a new way of thinking about ideas to bring them to commercial viability. That is not to say that venture can solve this problem. We have a crisis of magnificent proportions, both in the unemployment rate, but here's the news. We have 41% of people with disabilities without a bank account. They're unbanked or underbanked in America. And we can't expect that we're bringing to market this concept of venture capital or even of philanthropic capital without the banks coming to the table and saying, why is it that this group is not involved in financial inclusion? Folks like Daniel may or may not be looking to give away equity in their companies to venture capital, but they sure as well might be looking for a small business loan. Right. And so the issue of poverty is really tied to the, again, very conspicuous absence of debt capital, that there isn't loans given. There isn't a proliferation of loan instruments given to small business owners with disabilities. We need to bring people into the banking system. We have to do it with intention at the same time that we're talking about small business development and early stage companies.
I totally agree, Gina. I remember reading a paper from UN 6 years back in which they had said that our target is to have global financial inclusion by 2020. And I had written a paper on that in this conversation also, they're not talking about financial inclusion of people with disabilities, which is the sad state of affairs, because here we are in 2021, and yet those numbers have not moved forward, whether it's employment, whether it's poverty, whether it is, look at it, financial inclusion, the bank rates, as you banked, underbanked and unbanked rates are still stuck at 41. And maybe last I thought it was almost 50%. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. For some reason, the disability piece is not in the conversation of D&I conversations. We are still on the margins.
Totally agree. There is no inclusion without disability inclusion.
Right.
So Aarti, while you have the mic here, so to speak, let's talk a little bit about Synergies work, right? And what a company, an organization like yours would need to expand the work that you do, right? So in terms of, is it numbers of entrepreneurs, in the program, resources to provide to them, mentoring, connections, financial capital, more Daniels, right? Really brilliant, people who have great ideas, and we need the innovations, right? And the resources and services that they're coming up with. But if you'll speak a little bit to, what helps Synergies work grow or scale?
Well, I need all of that. I need Gina's support to put the money into Synergies work. No, we need all of that and more. So when we, as I said, that we've been working at this at 4 years to arrive and work with entrepreneurs on different businesses and with different abilities. And whether it's an entrepreneur with a disability or no disability, the needs are the same, right? They do need to have access to training and mentoring. They do need access opportunities to funding. They do need to access and support to get to a market and win customers over. All of these supports are needed by all entrepreneurs. And so we do need to capitalize, we do need financial capital to grow our footprint from where we are and make it into a scalable model, which allows us to reach more Daniels across the country, if not the globe. Because there is synergies when we bring in people together. There is no common, there is nobody who's addressing this market. And I think over a period of 4 years, we have come to a framework of support that is needed, which is not either or, but all of these are needed together for people to build sustainable businesses. This is not based on theory or a white paper or anything. This is what I've been doing for the last 4 years. And I realized that, yes, they need all these 3 things to do it. So yes, we need corporate partnerships. right? We need from them not only the financial support, we also need people, mentors to come in and give their time and their expertise and subject matter experts to talk to the Daniel and help him guide his business. We need visibility of this talent that is existing and is completely invisible to the larger market. So we need to create that visibility of market. And then we need individuals to help us scale this model so that it can reach the other parts of the country. So we want to have all three of these things to make it a sustainable process.
I agree wholeheartedly with Miss Aarti, because here's the thing about me personally. Before I met Miss Aarti and Synergies work, here's the thing. I was probably scared witless out of my mind sometimes whenever I heard the word like tax, bank, debt, or credit. And I'm like, how do I handle this? Because I feel like if I slip up even once, I would get screwed. But that's the thing. That's the narrative sometimes those people who use soft bigotry, as Miss Aarti would say in her bio, would use. It's like, do you really think that would really work for you? But that's the thing. You can't let them win that battle. You have to say that to yourself, first and foremost, that you can do this. Even if you need help, you can find a way through this and you will be secure throughout your own life. And anybody who's listening later on to this recording, whether it be somebody who is as high functioning as me or struggles to say just one word, I'm just going to say this to you. This is an important class. This is an important group of people who are looking out for you right here, and that they will care for you if you reach out to them, and that they'll always have your back.
Thank you for that great support, Daniel. I promise.
I think, if we wouldn't get in trouble, I would wrap right there and wrap this webinar up, because, Daniel, I don't think there's anything, we could say after that, that's going to hit that note. Thank you for that. Because I think it's so important for people with disabilities to feel like they have people in their corner, right? To take that leap of faith sometimes, and to be there for support. It's important for all of us, right? When you're putting yourselves out there and putting ourselves out there to launch jobs and businesses. So thank you. And yes, here. So Daniel, on that note, while you have the mic a little bit, throughout this series, we've had corporate executives on, we've had representatives from different business and financial investing firms. What would you say to people? What would you tell people or tell them specifically that would help entrepreneurs like yourself succeed? What messages do you have? Because your message is the one, right, we need to hear, and it's clear and it's loud and it's well-intentioned and it's pointed and it's exactly spot on. So I'm going to cede the floor to you, Daniel.
Okay, then. Over the long term, all entrepreneurs, including those with disabilities, need continued support, consideration, and hiring for qualified jobs. I believe in myself, and I have a great network of others who believe in me. Great network of others who believe in me. Just wanted to say that just to make sure I wasn't going too fast. Today, I would respectfully ask you, all the presenters and the attendees who, although I can't see, I know you're there, to believe in me and others with disabilities who want to be a productive member of society. I then ask you to go one step further and put that belief into action through disability inclusion in order to change the narrative on the dismal statistics, though, like the ones Miss Regina said earlier at the beginning, and those that involve employment of individuals with disabilities. And for anybody who is looking for either a voiceover talent or even just someone who can give them advice from my perspective, please share my story and consider hiring me to tell your company's story, because I promise you, I will not disappoint.
I think we all back that up. You
Totally.
will not. And thank you for being on this panel today, again, and sharing your story, because it is personal, and it shows, levels of success and progression for everybody. So Aarti and Gina, what would you add to Daniel's message, right, to investors that's needed? What are you seeing? How do we kind of bring all the perspectives together?
I think it makes economic sense to this point, what Gina was saying earlier, for investors and for companies to invest in this segment, that is the people with disabilities, if I can use the term. If, just numbers, if you look at it, I know we all know that there are more than 1 billion people with disabilities, but probably what we do not know is that these people with disabilities in the United States have more than 200 billion US dollars as spending power, which is what? Double that of the teen market, 18 times that of the tween market. Every 5 seconds, somebody in this country is turning 50, right? And those are the people who have the money. So it just makes economic sense for people, if they are looking to invest, not to ignore this huge population, but to invest in this population. It makes, I don't see any reason why they're not part of this conversation. Gina.
And as somebody that is, our company is facilitating impact investments, and so we actually don't need we don't need anybody to disabuse us of a medical model of thought about disability, a deficit model of thought. What really we hope to be in the vanguard of socializing other investors without the same depth of networks and market intelligence about disability design and where disability networks are in the world, not just here in the United States, but across multiple countries, that we really want to socialize our colleagues in the investment field to come along for the ride and actually see the core value creation that is contributing in very traditional business evaluation of companies. They're contributing to new technologies, whether it's AI, machine learning, SaaS platforms. I mean, you take it and if you sort of take disability out of the conversation, these are products that are truly viable contributions to the field of how we all work, or to how we sustain work. I mean, we are truly focused, and so are other investors, on I like to go around saying the finding, obtaining, training, and sustaining. We're focused on the whole life cycle of work. There are investments that are viable from a financial perspective in each of those verticals. Traditional generalist investors would be looking at them anyway. What we are trying to uncover is the deep and essential social value that is generated and is measurable by investing in the disability-led design. Why? Because of that total addressable market, which is when something is universally designed. And in fact, we find when there is an entrepreneur with a disability at its core, it's essentially stress test for the market. It's stress tested for the market, for the universality of the design, for the success of the design. So we're seeing that as an overall better investment proposition. We're trying to generate value by saying, put your chips on these designers, because they're testing these products before they go to market for their accessibility, for their use, and for their adaptability in a market that is now valuing more than anything else the adaptability and sustainability of work in new modes of working. So that is the investment thesis, and it is super relevant to Bob Lutke's fine scholarship and white paper on ESG investing, because the markets are already looking at the S in ESG and how to support the human capital contributions of workers with disabilities, looking not with a deficit model, but as a strength in the worldwide economy. We're taking a bit of a bottom-up approach because we're looking at the earliest stage companies in the market and trying to support them to viability. But other companies at the top of the index, of the top of the Fortune 500, are being evaluated by their investors based on how they treat the human capital contributions of workers. So the whole conversation in the worldwide market is being influenced by how to see the human capital contributions of diverse workers as value, as generating long-term value in companies instead of a deficit model. And so it's a no-brainer
Well, let's hope. But thank you, and I think, businesses, working, along people's strengths, healthcare working along people's strengths, right? Education working along people's strengths. I mean, a deficit approach doesn't work right for anyone. So I think it's an important, sort of societal shift that, disability advocates for years have been behind. And so to continue to elevate that and bolster that, I think is really important. Before I move on to another question, I do want to address one from one of the participants. So also everybody who's tuning in today, please add your questions in the chat. We will get to that. But, that Gina, this may go to you, but Aarti and Daniel, please tell me I'm wrong and weigh in here. But the question is, what are the ways to build credit for people with disabilities?
Well, it's absolutely important question. And let me preface the answer with all the time I'm hearing stories about entrepreneurs who are ready to start their business. And to Aarti's point earlier, they don't have the basic access to debt capital in terms of a consumer loan to purchase the technology they need. Or alternatively, before the pandemic, they don't have access to a loan to modify their van to get to the job or to get to generate the business and income in the business because there is an accessibility issue. So we really absolutely have a crisis based on financial inclusion alone. And generating debt and access to loans should be at the top of the list among many other issues right now with banks. One of the things that we are doing as an impact fund is we have carefully planned for the liquidity pool, which is where the money goes before it's deployed to investment capital, to be invested in community development financial institutions, which are the first line of defense in terms of community banking and access to capital for people who are in low and moderate income communities and traditionally overlooked by mainstream commercial banks. But that is not that is taking us part of the way, but that's not the full picture. The full picture needs to be that the larger banks also participate in aggressively serving the disability market. There has been federal law for 40 years that banks need to engage in community development activities in order to offset a long history of redlining low and moderate income communities and not giving them access to debt capital. And the disability community has the opportunity to say to banks under the Community Reinvestment Act that disability is a major portion of low and moderate income communities, that people with disabilities are 60% of those communities, and that they should have access to community development activities, to community investments, to access to capital, to additional ways to access commercial loans and other debt instruments. And so it's a real opportunity to open a policy conversation, a legal conversation, a conversation with banks. But even that's not very practical. The practical reality is we need some leadership from these banks. Aarti pointed out that fintech is going to will become the norm globally, that people do all of their banking on a phone. And it already has become the norm. And we have this tremendous digital divide in terms of technology, but it's also widening access to financial inclusion. This is something that impact investors are looking at for other groups of people, but that alone can't take care of that problem. We need leadership, both in terms of policy and regulation of banks and oversight of banks to make sure that the disability population is included in these banking activities. We also just generally need to have more discussions about where the law ends and where policy picks up on all of these issues. this is really cold comfort because they don't have an easy answer or an easy solution, but we have to talk about these issues because here's why I'm uniquely interested in this. Aarti is, and so is Daniel. You can't run a business in America, you know, without access to commercial capital, without access to loans. You know, this is not an equity game. If you're really talking about poverty eradication, you're talking about loans, and you're talking about both. You're working across asset classes. People with disabilities have been largely excluded from banking, and it's time to redress that issue and have that on the table at the same time that we're talking about entrepreneurship.
I agree with you on that part, because there is, as you said, there is most of the people with disabilities, a large number will have debt, but that debt is the bad debt. It is the medical debt that they have. And therefore, to answer the question of the participant, how to get credit and improve that credit rating is a difficult cycle. And it is only widening over the last few years because there is that increase in unemployment rate, and there is an increase in poverty. And now for entrepreneurship, you need access to commercial bank, and you don't have access to the bank itself, let alone have a credit rating to get an access to a loan from the banks. So how do we do that? So in entrepreneurship, interestingly, I don't know where I read it, that 1% increase in entrepreneurship leads to a decline of 2% decline in poverty. But that does not happen overnight. It's a sustainable cycle that has to be built over a period of time for them to move, for people to move out of poverty into a positive credit space.
So yes, and I think that's what makes it so hard. It's like, you know, creating that sustainable change, working, you know, the ecosystem and all of the moving pieces. And one of our participants also brought up a point that I think just needs to be embedded into the discussion, is the concern on the impact on people's, you know, healthcare benefit, right? So if somebody is accessing healthcare services through Medicaid or Medicare or SSDI, right, the disincentives still remain, and that has to be part of that sustainable change. But, you know, would love to hear, you know, if anybody has any comments on that.
Absolutely. Our system is geared towards the systemic keeping people in poverty. That is a policy change, and that is a required conversation that needs to happen. And having said that, there are still difficult to access, but there are pathways by which you can build entrepreneurship and still maintain your benefits and your health benefits, whether it's your Medicaid or Medicare, whatever you're using. But the question is that the policy is being designed in such a way that it is almost like jumping over an obstacle race, and it is a tiring process. It's almost telling people that don't do something because you will get dinged for it. Don't make money. We want you out of poverty, but don't get out of poverty, because if you make money, we will ding you for it. Yep. So it's a sad situation. But then there are pathways, you know, it's like, I think the conversation that is happening is that there is a need for a policy change even here. Definitely then required.
Completely agree. Gina, do you have anything to add to that? Because
agree. Yeah, and the SGA limits, you know, as set by federal legislation, the amount of money, the substantial gainful income that you can earn and before you lose your benefits should be a national embarrassment. That is the poverty trap. We have to either raise those limits or find a better way. And it is consistently held people in a level of precariousness that's unwarranted. Choosing between your work or your health, it seems like a false choice. You should be able to choose both. Right. And so we got to figure that one out. And the private sector should be demanding that we figure that one out too. So.
And just to add to something that Gina had said earlier about the funding that goes into employment and entrepreneurship is a question like we want to increase entrepreneurship and we want to increase the employment of folks with disabilities. But let's look at the amount out of the total pot of money that the federal government has, how much money is being directed towards employment increase? A small percentage. And even when that percentage of money that goes into it, there is bifurcation of funds. There is no policy on talking about entrepreneurship, right? And because of that, there is no policy supporting it. The money never goes into whatever you want to call it, self-employment or entrepreneurship to begin with. It is seen as the last resort. When everything else fails, for the most on the margins, they will do self-employment, or people who are with a milder disability and higher functioning folks. So it is not just seen as a preferred choice of employment because we don't put money behind it. Yeah, there are really systemic changes that need to be made for any sustainable change to happen.
Yeah, it's very true. And it's also, not to coin anybody's terms there, it's also very complicated. So I think, one of the questions, I would have it as we come to a close. We have a couple of minutes left, so I want to make sure we get everybody's, key points out. So Gina and, Daniel and Aarti, make sure if you have last minute points you want to make, we're going to get to that time. But where can people go to learn about, right, the opportunities out there, the risks out there, and to do so in an accessible way? Whether there are plain language or clearly accessible formats, some of the steps that people would need to take, right, and the barriers, that exist, to be written out. Are there places people can learn, or can we share some resources with participants today?
I'd like to say something I remembered from class. Not only do I know that Synergies work and the I2I business class that they sponsor actually helps with getting your finances in check and teaching you about them, but they've actually had other business partners that they've worked with that have helped them with that. Like, I remember there was this one fellow who ran something called a stable account structure that was literally called Stable. What was his name, Miss Aarti?
Doug Jackson.
Doug Jensen.
Doug Jackson.
Yeah, didn't hear it on that end. He was a great guy. He told me and everyone else in that class that if you have a disability, even if you're on the spectrum, we can help you out with that. We will be beneficial towards your life in terms of how you handle your money. So that's one outlet, and many others.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you.
Yeah, what Daniel was mentioning is the ABLE accounts. And we had Doug Jackson, who's the deputy director of the stable accounts, to talk to folks about where they can save money and without getting dinged on their SSI or SSDI.
Great. So yeah, any follow-up resources, we can send to people would be very helpful, since not everybody's eligible for ABLE accounts, right? We need to continue to build that quote unquote bank of resources that people can get to learn about their opportunities, to build off their own entrepreneurial skills, right, and get engaged, in business world more closely. So if there are no closing comments and we have no more questions coming in, I do want to just make sure that we take a moment. Daniel, Gina, Aarti, thank you all so much for joining today. I think hopefully people picked up some, good information on where to move forward. If not, they remember your names and reach out to be able to, learn and access the information, in a more one-on-one format. The next panel, because, right, this is a conversation that needs to continue clearly. And again, a thank you to the Harkin Institute and Goal 17 Partners and Global Goals Advisory, for moving this conversation forward and bringing really, great, smart people together like the three of you to be able to share, additional information. But the next one will be in mid-December. It'll be the 6th, obviously, in this 5th panel series and the final panel series. And we'll focus on how we create measurable goals and targets to better account for progress in achieving competitive integrated employment. After that particular session, the 6th one, the completion of the panel series, we think that the work of the partners will shift over to developing a white paper and additional content where those materials will summarize the conversations that have been had, bringing some of these ideas together in a more succinct format so people don't have to try to remember in between each one, including myself, and also providing, just clear actionable recommendations to making sure that people with disabilities are engaged in competitive integrated employment. So thank you again to everybody who was here. We appreciate your time. Thank you to everybody who joined our panelists today, and we hope to see you soon.
Hope to see you soon too. And on behalf of the disability community, I'd like to thank you for bringing me to this important issue to light. We really all do need to stop setting limits on unlimited potential and just recognize the ability instead of the disability. That's basically plain facts right there.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Words to close by here today, words to live by.
And thank you, Merrill.
Yes.
My pleasure. Learned a lot.
It was a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thanks, Gina, Daniel, and Merrill.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Aarti and Daniel.
I hope I get to see you again sometime soon, Miss Gina. You've been a delight.
It's great. It's great to get to know you, Daniel.
It was. Well, hope you all have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks. Goodbye.